So thank you everyone for joining us. I'm Akis, I'm one of the partners at Lakestar, a multi-billion-dollar European venture capital fund. We've invested in companies like Spotify, like Revolut, like Helsing, and I'm very happy here to have with me Niklas, who is the CEO and co-founder of Nelly, one of our best companies. We led the Series A of Nelly around 4 years ago. Nelly now employs close to 200 people, has raised over 100 million, processes over $1 billion in transaction volume. So I'm very excited that you're here. And the first question I'm going to ask you is, what does Nelly do? Give some context to the people.
So we are building the financial infrastructure for healthcare through software distribution to become the leading bank for healthcare.
Okay. So what does this mean exactly? So the financial OS for healthcare in fintech, there's a few different things. You started in Germany. You're now in a couple of countries. Can you talk a bit about how the product started, what it looks today, how you sequenced it? Because obviously selling into healthcare has been very difficult. It's an interesting fact, actually, across Europe, there haven't been that many European success stories in healthcare. It's very difficult to scale, and you stand alone in that. So maybe walk through your product strategy, your product evolution.
Absolutely. Maybe one step backwards. I learned at companies like N26 and Klarna, and what I have witnessed is if you want to crack a fintech market, it's usually by process innovation. And first of all, we looked at different markets where there's a huge potential to innovate, and realized that healthcare is a beautiful spot. Because if you go to your doctor, if you look at the software that they use and the patient journeys, it's basically very much under-digitized, and we saw that opportunity to basically land with a software product that reduces admin work, but basically land with a strategic product that allows us to build better financial products and to monetize through fintech. And very simply speaking, we digitized the clipboard that probably everyone knows when you go to your doctor, where you do like the pen and paper process of adding your healthcare data. We were the first ones to offer that on the smartphone via a QR code. But we also created a passive patient profile and a financial scoring to then allow patients to easily pay their healthcare invoice via Google Pay, Apple Pay. And so yeah, we started with the check-in, then we launched our checkout product, and in the last 3 years we added a couple of further AI workflow automations to basically further reduce admin work.
I'm going to ask you about this in a bit. Before that, the sector that you're operating in is very heavily regulated. You have to deal with regulators across the fintech side of the business, but also across the healthcare side of the business. And that is always tricky, especially once you're starting. The top thing that you're thinking about is how you can sell, how you can grow, not how you're going to deal with BaFin or other institutions, especially when you have like less than 30 employees, right? And however, you are one of the companies in our portfolio that managed to navigate this quite well, despite the original challenges. Can you walk through people, maybe that are interested and are building something in regulated industries, how you manage that?
Sure. So the financial regulator was a tougher nut to crack, to be very transparent. And what we learned is, in the beginning, facilitate as much as you can. Don't use your funding to basically spend $500,000 on lawyers to figure out a way to be compliant, but not understanding your go-to-market or the problem of your customers. So we partnered with a bank that had the necessary licenses for us to actually test and validate that the approach that we have actually resonates with customers and that we're actually solving a problem. So that was basically the start, and I would always recommend also when internationalize or tapping into new markets to always facilitate first, go through a partner approach, and then once you have a critical volume or business to then basically launch and go for an own license.
I will ask you a follow-up question on this. Can you give some examples of some of the interactions that you've had? You've gone through some tough times. Now you can perhaps sit back and say that you've been successful in a certain way, in a certain dimension. You're a big company with tens of millions of revenue. You're supporting thousands of customers, millions of patients. However, for you to get to that point, you had to overcome certain obstacles on the regulatory front, but also on the way you built your product and you interacted with your customers. And I think it's interesting as this parallelizes well with other companies that we have seen who actually didn't manage to navigate this as well and as maturely, because you guys took it very seriously and you engaged with them from the first beginning. You didn't try to postpone it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think in general, customer obsession and focus on the problem is the main priority, not like, let's say, serving regulators. I think that is always the second step. I think we also had some big learnings and also sharing mistakes. I think in the beginning we avoided to speak to regulators because you have to see also what is BaFin. It's basically FCA and it's the financial regulator from Germany. And after Wirecard, they basically became very restrictive and very, let's say, risk averse. And for us, we basically try to avoid speaking to them by just working with partners. However, our volume grew so much that at some point, actually like our competitors were going to the BaFin and basically told them, hey, please look closer. And in the end, we got into an interaction with them. And I think that's the biggest learning. And now we have a very good relationship to them. But it's like include them into your decision making and don't be afraid of the regulator. I think that's one of the most important ones because in the end, they want to be included in your decision making and not get the feeling that you try to curve them. And I think that's something that we did very well in the last 2 years. And today we're building products together with them. And I think that's something we could have done earlier.
Yeah. No, I think this is true, and it looks very different. This is something that, when we were investing, we were contemplating, but we hadn't appreciated, right? When I was talking to my other partners in the investment committee, it wasn't something that we can appreciate, especially when a company is young. It's one of those unknown type of risks that it's coming, but you need to rely on the team to be able to navigate this.
Absolutely.
So it's a bit tricky. The other topic that I wanted to talk to you about is, we talk a lot about AI, and I think every panel here, as we're talking about AI products, we have some amazing founders in the conference. When you started, you were building a software tool for the check-in and check-out process within a healthcare practice, which is far removed from the AI transformation that we see now. However, now, after 5 years of building, you're starting to add and layer AI products within the Nelly suite. Can you talk maybe a little bit about them? What's the hype with AI? What is it that you guys are doing? What was the feedback from the patients and the doctors?
No, absolutely. I think first of all, we are a fintech team that use software as a distribution channel, but what we learned in healthcare is what our customers actually pay for is interoperability, meaning integrations into their core practice management systems. And that's something that is really like the tougher one. Our problem today is not using AI. Luckily, our software part of the business was not as large that we, in the, let's say, end of 2024, were able to move the organization towards, let's say, an AI native company, because the software piece was still very small. And I'm not speaking only on the development side, but on the pricing side. I mean, we didn't have the issue of a large SaaS business that had a per seat pricing and that now had to switch to AI. I think for a company like ours that is also like making major revenues through the fintech side, it's also how can you apply AI internally to be on the winning side of this transformation. And when you think about, let's say, onboarding processes, KYC processes, etc., where you make sure that you don't increase headcount, but rather make sure that you stay efficient, was a major, let's say, nut to crack. And I would also say we were on the winning side of this because we didn't develop our own models. I mean, we saw, let's say, large healthcare software providers like Dr. Lib, for instance. They were very early. They started training on own models and do the connotation. We actually came a bit later, but we facilitated in the end, and that was the right strategy because competing with, let's say, the large language model providers, didn't work out or wouldn't work out. So,
yeah. I think the other thing is you're sitting on a huge data set. I think these models now, and we're seeing this on the investing side, ultimately, they can get you up to a point. Then you need to know your domain. You need to be able to work with users. You'll see in some of the big AI labs, they're spinning out new entities so that they can target sectors, right? Just because they realize that their product's way too horizontal. And I think this is something that you guys capitalized very well, right? And you're already going to be generating a few million of revenues this year on the AI front. And I think from the investing standpoint and things that we look at, it's actually not that easy for us to navigate this ecosystem. You know, the impact that these big AI companies have in the market has been quite transformational, and I can talk to you about this more if you like, but at the end of the day, I think the way you guys approached it was very much about you sequence the product so that you can start with the software, you can add the fintech, and you went from a place where you were charging people $2,000-$3,000 to now $7,000-$8,000 per customer, which is a huge increase over the last 2-3 years, right? It's not very common.
Yeah. No, I agree to this. I think still in all this hype, I mean, when we started nearly 4.5 years ago, friends of mine and also investors asked us, why don't you do anything with blockchain? And we were like, what kind of problem should that solve, right? Then 3 years later, everyone asks us, what are you doing with AI? And I think always do the backwards planning from the problem and see where can I use that technology to actually automate or support my customers. And I think with AI, there are many of those, but why we are winning is because we are focusing on a specific vertical. In our case, it's dentistry, it's the integrations, because again, like building software and building products and MVPs became, let's say, easier and cheaper than ever before. But if they don't really work if you integrate them well and if you combine them and you build compounding effects in your own system. And I have this example of one dentist, for instance, I mean, in our generation, building his own booking management system. Yeah, he did that, but now he comes to us and asks us, can I use your integrations because I cannot actually integrate it in my workflows? So, yeah, I think it's always important to have a vertical focus and make sure that you have a deep integration, and the interoperability in the healthcare space, again, is crucial.
Yeah. And one of the things that you guys did from the beginning, looking back 4 years when we invested, and when I was presenting this in our investment committee, the main question was, no one really wanted to invest in a software company for healthcare. It's not an interesting field. There haven't been a lot of good successes. Well, however, what was unique about the company was that they were building the software as an entry point into the payments ecosystem within healthcare, which is, just in Germany, is around 400 billion, right? And you end up taking a cut out of this. And this is something that we didn't see in other companies. You need to be able to layer into it over time. You need to be patient. You need to play the long game, and you need to start with something so that then you can go into something else. And I think it's the same with the AI product that you have. You didn't start doing it when everyone else was doing it. You started talking to users. You tried to understand what the pain points were, and then you added it. And I think this was a big part of the debate that I used to have with the rest of my partners at the firm, because back then, the company was quite simple, right? It didn't have the team that you have today. You didn't have the products. You didn't have access to the fintech payments that you had. So it definitely looked very different.
Yeah, I agree. But I also have to say, I mean, historically, you guys preempted us. So you were the brave one that put the first term sheet on the table. And maybe a quick insight, because I think it's important for a company like ours in an industry where you have a typically hard go-to-market and where you don't have this kind of D2C, either like incredible hockey stick, but more like the long game, as you mentioned. We need investors who also go that path. And how we did our due diligence, because I understand you also did it, was like we asked a intern from Lakestar about the partners. And the feedback was that, especially on you, Akis, that you are the hardest working guy at Lakestar. And we definitely have one of the best partners on our board if we choose you, and someone that is supportive, and also someone who has a high conviction. And I also have to mention this, there are always times in a journey where you are uncertain, and I feel you're always the guy that is supportive, and even in hard times, motivates by the strong belief and the strong conviction in us as a team, and in our case. So, but quick question, you mentioned it briefly, but work hard, but how hard had you worked to get Nelly through the IC?
It wasn't that hard. It was more like there's always a debate. You need to be conservative in front of your other partners, right? You don't need to pitch. You need to present the investment case. You need to be rational as to what it is that you can underwrite on an investment case, and there's some things that you don't know, and hence you're taking a risk and a bet on. the good thing is that the founding team of the company was outstanding. Like all of you were very complementary together. They were filling different gaps of each other. And I thought that was very important. At the same time, the product that you had built and were selling, you managed effectively to close the German market on the software side just after a year and a half of beginning, which is not very easy. So for the benefit of everyone, what they were doing, they would go to a very large healthcare chain with 100 practices and they would just sell to them before they even had a proper product, which is quite unique for a company at that stage. And that led to us to believe and have a lot of more conviction. I thought that it's a lot more difficult to sell a software tool versus a fintech tool in this sector, because we were not that stressed about the ability to capture part of the payment. So I think this was the debate. The debate was about whether you guys would be able to sell as fast as you were building product, right? Because the way you were building the product was extremely fast. So that was the main thing that I think for us gave us a lot of comfort, and I think since then we've invested in you 4 times. You know, you are one of the breakout companies in our portfolio, so we're of course quite proud that you've gone through that phases and you've managed to transform the company. Last question from me is around how your role has changed. You know, you've been building this company now for a few years. You're the CEO of the company. You have a big team now. You have different responsibilities. You focus on different aspects of the job now compared to 5 years ago. Can you talk a bit about what has changed for you?
Sure.
What is top of mind for you now compared to a few years back?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, in the last 4.5 years, every year my role had to change and I had to grow into it. It makes it very exciting, but also, let's say you always have to get out of your comfort zone. In the beginning, it's really about finding and identifying the right problem to solve and sequence it in the right way, meaning you have to be laser focused on your customers and your product and choosing the right co-founder team, right? And I think also managing expectations within the co-founder team and making sure that you're complementary and that you set up the company initially for success. I mean, then it's really about like founder sales mode, like you're very much hands-on and you have to, let's say, I mean, you're the one that needs to drive the business, even like until you're 30 people. And then it switches more on like, the first one is obviously go-to-market and top line. Now, like let's say after Series A, you need to also prove that you optimize unit economics and you need to focus on like that you have a scalable business that generates significant profits, right? And not only focusing on top line. And I think also now post-Series B, it's really about being able to delegate, because if I do sales or if I do like product, it won't change the needle that much anymore because we are, let's say, 150 people these days. So focusing on hiring is the crucial part, and the long-term strategy, right? Like making sure that if you take decisions today, they are, let's say, feeding into the long-term strategy, even if they don't, like, you know, the most logical ones if you think about the first quarter. So I have to basically live and think about 2 quarters ahead, whereas my team is actually like focusing on just, you know, reaching the goals for this quarter. And yeah, having that kind of being able to zoom out, but also zoom in when it's necessary. I think that's the skill the muscle I train to these days. Now my last question, Akis, to you. By the way, fun fact on hard working, just I wanted to add this. When we raised with Lakestar, we didn't even have a pitch deck. And I remember we had an IC, so you had to do a lot of work to write a very good IC memo. But looking at companies, and now as a founder, I also get approached on angel rounds. I see so many decks these days with AI, let's say, painted over it. And how has, let's say, the selection process of you know, betting on the right companies changed with the huge technology transformation that happened in the last 2 years?
Yeah, so I guess very quickly I'll say that the biggest thing is we see very small teams going very far. Like you guys are 150 people, but you're way less compared to what you would have been if you had started the company 15 years ago, because you're much more productive. We have companies with 10 employees that do tens of millions of revenues as well. And I think this is a big change, which is it's a very attractive time to be starting a company as a result. When it comes to how our investing strategy has changed, We invest in into vertical things within AI, so things where liability still sits with the user. So for example, if you're a lawyer, you still need to review a contract. You can't shift that liability to the AI tool. And at the same time, we're investing a lot into robotics and to defense. So we have, out of the 20 companies in defense in Europe that have raised more than 100 million, Lakestar has invested in around 15 of them. So it's something that we've taken a bet, both geopolitically, but also because AI and autonomous systems have changed how warfare is conducted, and you can take a look at how Ukraine has gone to war the past few years. You'll see the impact on that. So for us, it's much more about being targeted, being focused, raising funds that are specific, and instead of just doing a horizontal job and trying to cover every single sector. With that, I'll say thank you very much for coming to Athens. It's a pleasure to have you.
You're welcome.
And I hope you guys enjoyed the panel.
Thank you.